Today on Online for Authors, I'm chatting with Kevin Hwang, author of The Regression Strain. Welcome, Kevin.
Hey, Terry, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, and I'm super excited to have you with me today. Before we jump in and get to the deepness of this book, give us the elevator pitch. What are people going to find when they open up a cover of The Regression Strain?
Well, it's a medical thriller. It features a young doctor from Houston who gets on a cruise ship in Copenhagen that's bound for New York, and he thinks it's going to be an easy job, and he needs an easy job to kind of get away from a lot of the stuff he's dealt with at home. But he finds out that it's not quite so easy, and people start behaving very strangely on the ship, and he's got to figure out why.
He's got to figure out why. Well, it had me glued. I had to keep turning the pages, which is really good. I also had to keep putting it down. I'm that kind of reader though, where it's like, whoo, boy. And then I wait a few minutes, like, no, I got to read some more. And then I read some more. And then it's like, oh, I had to. So it had me doing that, which is good, which is exactly what you want. Yeah. Why medical thrillers? What about medical thrillers made you say, this is what I'm going to do for this?
Well, I tried to write a couple of novels, didn't get really that far, maybe chapter one, that didn't have anything to do with medicine. But, I am a doctor, I'm an internal medicine physician. And I finally realized, well, I should probably just write what I know and stretch it a little bit, but to start with something familiar. So I decided, yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to lean in and write something that in a field that I'm familiar with. Although I can't say that I've necessarily favored medical thrillers as my go-to genre in reading. I read widely, so I read all sorts of books. But I thought medical thrillers would be good for my background for my first novel.
Right, and I think sometimes just a place to start.
Yeah.
Right. So my first one was historical fiction, and I chose it mostly because I love research, and I'm not super good at setting. And so a historical setting is great because I already know what it is. I don't have to make it up. I don't have to, I just have to research it, which I love to do. So you kind of find a place that feels good for that first novel. Like what works with you. And you did a good job. It felt very real. And I never once thought, now that doesn't seem right. I mean, it felt very good. So that you did a great job with that. The book is set post-COVID, right? And so did our COVID pandemic spark this idea of this pandemic thing in the book?
No, actually, because I started writing it before the pandemic.
Oh, doesn't that scare you a little?
Yeah, and when the pandemic came around, obviously we all had to deal with it in many different ways. But as it relates to how I thought about my novel, I went through the whole spectrum of emotions and thoughts. I thought the most extreme was, well, no one's going to want to read my book because
who wants to read a book about a pandemic after one, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And then I swung to the other side saying, people say there's only 7 types of stories or 3 types of stories, depending how you describe it. And we're all just writing different versions and our unique versions of it. And I bought into that idea. And then it became obvious that I was also using this as an excuse. I mean, first of all, there was a lot of reasons why I couldn't write continuously during that time. But also it was convenient for me to use it as an excuse to just stop working on it.
Right.
When I realized, like, if I put it out there and people didn't want to read it, it probably wasn't going to be because of that we went through a pandemic. I mean, maybe some people, like right after, wouldn't want to read it because of that. But there were many things that I could do to make it appealing.
Right.
Despite that, it covered a
I know I think we all do that too. The idea of, well, I can't do it because no one's going to read it, because maybe I shouldn't, because you seem to have the same issue going though that I do. You were writing, and this pandemic, you were writing about a pandemic essentially, and a pandemic happened. Yeah. And my first book was Sunflowers Beneath the Snow, which is about Ukraine, and it ends with Russia invading Ukraine in 2014. And the book came out, and 1 month later, Russia invaded Ukraine again. And Yeah. So I've told people that I'm going to write about world peace. What are you going to write about next?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, make it happen. Just speak it into existence. Or
Seriously.
type it into existence. Oh my goodness.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So have you ever worked as medical staff on a cruise ship?
That's a good question. So, I mean, I've been on a lot of cruises with my family, and no. The answer is I've not worked as a doctor on a cruise ship. I visited the medical center of a cruise ship in the very late stages of editing my novel when I'd already written almost everything. And I was relieved that I didn't find anything that would have made me go back and change anything.
Had to go back and really fix things.
Right. I mean, I took some pictures of areas that I was allowed to take pictures in,
Right.
and but I'd already done a lot of research on YouTube. We all know you can do a lot of research on YouTube and online. So that was very useful. I thought about, when I was doing the research for this book and just watching videos and reading about what other people's experiences were working in the medical center of a cruise ship, I thought, man, that sounds like it could be fun. It could have been fun for me at the right time in my life, younger without a family and all that stuff.
Right.
But no, I haven't done it. So I did have to do research on that part of the novel pretty extensively.
Yeah. So let's talk about research. You say you do a lot of online research. Do you have go-to sources? Do you do research throughout the whole project? Do you front load your research? How do you do it?
Well, I think I watch a lot of YouTube videos because there's a lot of videos where these nurses and doctors will just post day in the life of whatever in the cruise, and also just musicians, or other staff members, because people are very interested in that. It sounds glamorous,
There is something about the idea that you get on a ship and you go all over the world, right?
Yeah. So there's a lot of videos on it. I also kind of lurked on some forums of people who, not forums specifically to working the medical center on a cruise ship, but travel forums where people would ask am I allowed to bring this type of medication? Or what if this type of emergency happened? And I just kind of glean. But as I typically do with research, I never trust just one or two sources. I need to see a lot of it and form a kind of see a convergence and form a consistent picture in my mind, so that I'm not drawn to astray by just one person's experience.
Right. Because you can do that where you think this must represent everything, and then you find out later it was just an anomaly. So you have to know what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Other than YouTube videos and forums, did you do any reading? Did you do any, or was that pretty much how you did your research? And then let's talk medical research as well. And did you have to do any of that?
Well, okay, so still on the cruise ship thing. I mean, I do remember in one of the cruises that we took when I was writing the book, not the last cruise when I went to the medical center when I had a cold or whatever, but just on cruises, I did specifically take a lot of notes on observations that I probably would not have done if we were just there, just vacation. I wasn't working on the book. So I made note of a lot of specific things. I didn't read any books about it, but I think I did actually. There is a, I guess it is a novel, but more like almost like a memoir that's thinly disguised as a novel, or a novel thinly disguised as a memoir. I'm not sure. This guy did write about his experiences working as a doctor on a cruise ship, a British guy. Yeah. I did read that, and that was helpful.
Absolutely. So medically, I mean, I know you're a doctor, but did you have to do any research to make sure that this particular pandemic was something that could potentially be realistic? I recognize it's fiction, but did you do research to make sure that people who are medical weren't reading it going, this could never happen?
Yeah. I mean, I did. So it is fiction. So it is stretching some of it. And I asked some of my colleagues and said, hey, look, does this sound like too outlandish? And they knew it was fiction. And they were fairly liberal in that respect, saying, look, Kevin, this is fiction. You can do whatever you want. I'm not describing it as a science fiction novel or fantasy or speculative, but it pushes the envelope a little bit. with regards to some of the things that might happen, but it could happen. But I also I was very careful. I didn't want to pin the whole appeal of the story based on how clever the science was, because
Right.
I've observed in many areas that sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. And if I come up with something that I try to sell off as very original, far-fetched idea, it could actually happen before the book comes out, and then it would seem stale or just like everyday life,
Exactly.
you know?
Yeah. I know.
So yeah, I had to do. I had to do one. You know, in internal medicine, I have a fairly broad background. It's broad and not as deep as some specialists, but it's broad.
Hmm.
So I think I could cover most of this stuff and just do a little bit of research here and here, like on some specific medications that I needed to brush up on
Right.
before
Right.
putting that in there.
Yeah, absolutely. I You did a good job with some foreshadowing in the beginning. You kind of get on the cruise ship and he immediately has like an immediate problem, not medically, but an immediate problem that he walks away from. Some guy gets angry at him and he walks away from him, and it kind of is over. But there's that piece in a reader's mind that goes,
Yeah,
okay, there's a reason for that. Like what
yeah,
is that reason? And then you start paying attention. So you did a really good job. And there were other places that I can't talk about because I would give away the story, and I won't do that to an author. But there were other times where things would happen and I'd go, oh, I do remember that coming up earlier. And now I know why it was important. And at the time, it seemed important for one reason, and then it turned out to be important for another. So you did a really good job with that. Are
okay.
you a plotter? Did you know all of those plot points were going to happen, or are you more of a pantser and then you said, "Oh wow, that worked out really well"?
Yeah, that's it. That I thought about this a lot. I wanted to be a plotter when I first started out, and I realized that it wasn't me. But
Yeah,
I'm kind of a hybrid. So I'm a plotter I was this in my first novel. Who
yeah,
knows how I'm going to change? But what I did was I learned a lot about story structure, and repeatedly, and I tried to just kind of lay out the major plot points in the book and say, okay, by the 25% point, I want Peter, the protagonist, to be doing something of this nature, or
right.
what is it going to be, or he's going to do this. Now I've got to get in some events before that. Um, and so I needed that guidance just so I wouldn't be writing nonsense and off the rails. But even within that, if I would work on the first eighth or the first quarter of the book, I would write stuff and realize, okay, well, maybe it should go like this instead of that.
Yeah,
And then, of course, there were many drafts. So, um, what I what I learned that would be helpful is the layering concept. So I would go back and say, okay, I want to plant a clue, and maybe I didn't do a good enough job, and I'm going to go back later on.
and find a way to do that.
Yeah, plant
Yeah,
that here or there and stuff like that.
I think there's the debate between whether you should be a pantser or a plotter, which is best. Blah, blah, blah. I'm a pantser. I've tried plotting. I've tried plotting many different ways,
Uh-huh.
trying to come up with something that works, and it just doesn't work for me. My characters refuse to play the game, and they will only play when I just let them go. But
Yeah.
then on the other end, now I've got my first draft out. Now I have to go back and essentially plot. And I have
Uh,
to say, okay, I've wandered in the woods too far here. We're already 50% of the way in the story and nothing major has happened. So I have to come back
yeah.
and say, okay, for this to have happened, this thing that I have happen way on page 200 needs to happen up front. I
Uh-huh.
need to, and that's how I do it. I think that we all plot eventually.
Yeah.
It's just, do we do it beforehand or do we do it after?
Yeah.
And I'm an after plotter. I have to go back and fix it now. And sometimes it's by pulling a chapter in the middle of the story and putting it to the front. And now we've had a little flashback or a flash forward, and we know something that's coming. We don't
Oh,
know
yeah.
everything, but we know something.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's I don't know how to write any other way. I've tried. It just doesn't work for me.
Well, yeah, I can kind of see what you're saying, like how it might work differently for everybody. And I think what held me back in my prior attempts was the reading advice that I was reading was only about plotting and outlining. Like
Right.
there was no acknowledgement in the things that I was reading about, the fact that some people would just write like the way you said, or maybe more middle like me, which is some plotting and some pantsing. It was all about, you've got to write this outline, you've got to write this
Right.
outline.
Right.
And
Right.
then that would be very painful for me to try to do the whole outline, and then I just fizzle out in the first chapter because I wasn't sure what the outline was like. It was not good. So once I realized like there's many ways to do it, then I just kind of felt more freedom.
So it's funny. My first book, I very much was a pantser. I didn't worry about it. I just did what I did. It was my second book that I started to worry because I thought, well, I didn't do it right the first time. Like everyone, because I had read several craft books that were talking about plotting and different ways to plot. And I have several author friends who are plotters who put down, all the beats, and they have like a whole wall full of little sticky notes. And I'm thinking, oh, I'm doing it so wrong. I'm not. And then it turns out that no, I'm not doing it wrong. I'm doing what I need to do for my creativity to come out.
Yeah.
And then I go back and I do the same thing they do, though. I go back and I look and it's like, yeah, I need something that happens here because it's getting boring. And I mean, I had one of my editors, it was funny because she said, Terry, you're wandering in the woods again. I said, yeah, I know, I'm trying, So what is it that you hope that people get from the story, other than a great story, which it is? Do you have anything else that you were hoping that they would get from it? Or is this truly just a thriller and you didn't have anything else in your mind?
I tried not to be preachy.
Yeah.
I hope I didn't come off as preachy. I have my opinions. I have a worldview that, changes as I change as a person. In some ways it changes. And then Peter is struggling to figure out his worldview, or just to make it through the next day, actually. But it's influenced, how he copes with it is influenced by his worldview. So I tried to make him just kind of a guy who's struggling, and I tried to share his thoughts, and he doesn't have the answers. So he's not also the type of guy that's going to proclaim his worldview, but he does fight back when he encounters the main antagonistic force that presents a worldview that he doesn't agree with.
Right. And I found the book like I said, to be very fascinating. I think that maybe even more fascinating because I have lived through a pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
There was one point in the book. I didn't think I could talk about this without it, but there was one point where you kind of reference COVID and the fact that people were weary.
Yeah.
And that, here you're on a ship and you're trying hard to get people to understand something good's not happening here.
Yeah.
We need to all go back to doing what we had done during COVID. And the pushback was tremendous. And I can imagine that that's exactly what would happen.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. People got weary. It was kind of like, I'm tired of social distancing. I'm tired of masks. I'm tired.
Yeah.
This has to be over now. And if someone right now if I were to get an email right now that said, oh, we're going back to that, I would think, oh, please, no.
Right. So, I mean, it's because I had to go back once it was evident that COVID was really receding in the rearview mirror of our distance by the time I would be ready to publish this. I had to go back and put in little statements like, about referencing COVID.
Exactly.
And just acknowledging that this was in a world that had gone through COVID. But it wasn't, I mean, the story's not about
no, it's not
coming back, but I had to do that. Whereas in the earlier drafts, like we were in COVID, so I really did not know how to handle it at that time. And once we got in the breathing room, I said, okay, I'm going to say.
So now I know how to handle it because I can do what I think how the world would respond to another pandemic-like situation so soon.
Yeah.
After finally, being allowed to be quote unquote normal, whatever that means, but back to more or less back to the way things have been.
Yeah. Before COVID.
Yeah. Right. And then to have someone come in and say, oh no, we're going back to that kind of state again, not COVID, but that kind of state again. I think that there would be quite a bit of sure, you do it if you want to, but I'm not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that definitely happened in the novel.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What do you have coming up next, Kevin? What kinds of things are you thinking of writing, or are you?
Yeah, I am. When I was, kind of at the later stages of editing this one, I started planning a novel that had nothing to do with this, the regression strain.
Right.
And then as I started like getting some early feedback on the regression strain, it was becoming more and more of a reality that it was going to be out there in the world. I started feeling more confident that maybe it could be the foundation for another story for the same character.
Okay.
So it's not directly a sequel because I wrote the Regression Strain as a standalone novel. That's how it should function. But I did leave the door open so that people could follow,
the character,
characters and stuff like that. But the main conflict is over by the end of this novel.
Okay.
Because I just knew that just one novel will be hard enough, so I didn't want to tackle a series right off.
You didn't want to start off with an idea that I'll have 5. You wanted to start with your 1 and see where it went, right?
That's right.
I get that. So you have a second then that you're working on in this series, and then you have an idea for something totally unrelated.
Yeah, the idea for something totally unrelated is deep on the back burner or whatever, deep in my file cabinet or computer.
Yeah.
It doesn't have any elements that have any time sensitivity to it.
Yeah.
That one set, the one that I put, on the back burner for now was like set in the 80s.
Okay.
And so,
so the 80s are always going to be the 80s, and you can come back to that.
The 80s will always be the 80s.
Yeah.
Now, I may forget more and more of it as I get older, but it'll always be there. So the second one I'm working on now, I'm very early in on it. I mean, I'm just like drafting the first couple of chapters and everything. So I'm doing the plotting and pantsing combo with that.
Yeah, fantastic. Do you have a name for the book yet, or a working title that you'd be willing to share?
It might be called. I thought about house calls.
Okay.
That's the theme of it, but then because of the conflict and because it rhymes with regression strain, I thought about maybe something like the confession game. And I said, well, if I have the regression strain and the confession game, I have to come up with a third novel because things.
Well, yeah, because it has to come in 3s, right?
Yeah, and then I have to think of some noun and something that rhymes. So trying not to put I have to have the tail wag the dog. I'm trying to spend not so much energy on that, just focusing on getting the second story down.
So do you have trouble with titles? I do. I hate titles. I would rather write a manuscript than a title.
Oh, yeah. The Regression Strain was not a title until after I'd finished it. I mean, I carried it through the whole time with the title of Belly of the Whale. Mm-hmm. And that element or theme is kind of in the book. But some folks thought that Belly of the Whale, like, it was too soft and it wasn't edgy enough for the kind of thriller that the book
that it turned out to be, right? Yeah.
I don't know what you think about that, but Belly of the Whale was my working title for several years.
So the working title for my first book was one of the characters, like the first character that you meet. I named it that just so that I could save it in my computer.
Oh yeah.
And it's a Ukrainian man. His name is Alexandro. And it's like, that is the worst possible name for a book because you can't remember it, you can't spell it, you can't pronounce it. Like it's and I knew that, but I needed to save it as something. So that's what I saved it as. And I honestly thought that book was going to go out as You Name It by Terry M. Brown because I couldn't come up with a name. And I find titles to be a very, very difficult. And then I know other authors who do it just opposite, where they have the title first.
Yeah, one of my folks in this writing group that I'm in, he says he's done that before. The title and the blurb first before the novel. What was the title? What was the final title of the?
Sunflowers Beneath the Snow.
Sunflowers Beneath the Snow. Yeah, that's much more descriptive than like Sandra or
Yeah. And I mean, I knew that was a terrible title, but I had zero idea. And this went back and forth between me and the publisher, back and forth and back and forth. And they would shoot out some names and I'd think, oh, I hate all of those. And I would shoot them some names and they didn't like any of those. And back and forth it went until finally, I don't know what, it just all of a sudden it was kind of like, okay, so it's really cold. Like we deal a lot with how harsh things were.
Yeah.
I knew that sunflowers were the national flower of Ukraine.
Oh, okay.
But they're not the first flower up. And I kind of was thinking something along, like that first flower that comes out in the winter that lets you know that things are going to be better. And it was like, well, I can't do that with a sunflower. They don't pop out until June, and so that isn't going to work. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, but they're beneath the snow.
Yeah.
Like they're there.
Like
they're just not. Yeah. They're waiting, but they're not. And then all of a sudden it came to me, but it was torturous.
Yeah.
It was torturous. So
it feels like one of those things where it's hard. It's not something that you can just sit down and like work through by sheer effort. It just has to like strike you,
Yeah. All of a sudden, like, wow, my third book the title was actually more or less created by some of my readers. So I had been sending out like the back of the book blurb and other things and said, look, here are some general ideas I have for titles, but I hate all of them. So do any of you have something? And little by little, I started seeing, oh, wait, this is where it's going. And then I had someone give me a suggestion that helped me. And from that point, then all of a sudden it was like, there it is. There's the title. But I would have never been able to do it on my own. It wasn't coming. I had zero idea again for that book. So
good group of readers you have there.
Yes. It's nice to have people that are dedicated readers, not just to me, but dedicated readers.
Yeah.
Who tell you, oh, I think it could be, and they start throwing out ideas. And at least now I feel like, well, I'm listening to the kind of people who would read the kinds of things I write.
Yeah.
And these are the kinds of titles that they're looking for. And so that helps because I'm just not good at it. Yeah. I can write a back of the book blurb, no problems. Oh. But when it comes to writing a title, I'm terrible.
Oh, yeah.
You don't like the back of the book blurbs either?
I struggle a lot with that. And I actually just changed it too. So the one I probably sent you, I don't know which one I sent you, but I just based on the sheer factor of time, I'm pretty sure it's different than the one I have up now.
Okay.
In fact, I'm 100% sure because I just changed it last week.
Oh, okay. Then definitely.
Yeah. So I'm not real good at that. And it feels like one of those things where like, I could sit at it and make a change. I could make a lot of changes, but I'm not sure if it would help. And so at some point, I just need to just leave it alone.
Leave it alone and move on.
And move on. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what about covers? Did you have problems coming up with what you wanted to do with the cover, or was that an easier?
There were. I think there were two. It was easy in one aspect in the beginning, and then tough at the end. So I worked with a great company, a professional cover designer, named a company named Demonza, out of New Zealand, of all places. But they've done a lot of covers for self-published authors like me and traditionally published authors as well. They're publishing houses. So I just described the concept. They looked at a synopsis and the blurb that I had. And they gave a couple of versions. It did take me a couple of days and to narrow down one version that I wanted to carry forward. And I got some feedback from my writing group. And then everything went well. They tweaked that version of it, and it was looking really good. But at the very end, I looked at one kind of file, and I blew it up, and I saw this little detail. And I was thinking, well, that doesn't really match the vision of the book. It was really just the main character. You could see, if you look closely on the cover, he's wearing glasses. And then in some parts of the book, Peter does wear glasses, but he wears sunglasses and not the type that I would imagine on the book. But everyone told me, Kevin, no one's going to notice, and if they do, they're not going to care. And once I really believed that, I just let it go. And they were right. Like no one has ever said anything about whether Peter wears glasses
or not. Yeah, because you're right. probably in most cases when they're reading the book, that detail is so small and they're not blowing it up large on their computer, looking at it all, trying to figure it out. And if you're reading it on a Kindle or something, a lot of times, you only see that cover at the very beginning.
Right.
It's not like when you're holding the book and you see it every time you pick it up. But if you're doing so, I suspect a lot of people never even really pay a lot of attention. We put so much effort into things like this, and then we find out that, maybe it's what gets them to pick up the book in the beginning, but they certainly don't scrutinize it to find out if we've, gotten every element exactly right. So
right. Now, I think that's been the case. I just wanted to get them to, be interested enough to potentially buy the book.
Absolutely. And they should. Absolutely. So, hey, guys, if you want to keep this conversation going, head on over to Novels and Latte Book Club on Facebook. There you're going to have a chance to win a digital copy of The Regression Strain. Just tell me something you liked or learned during this podcast, and you will be in the drawing. So, Kevin, if someone wanted to get up with you, talk with you about this book or talk with you about your writing style, how do they do that? What's the best way to contact you and to learn more about your work?
Probably on my website, which is my first and last name. So it's kevinhwang.com, KevinHwang.com. And there's more info about me and the book, and my social links are on there as well. And there's a sign up for my newsletter.
Fantastic. And guys, I'll have all of that in the show notes. So take a look, run right out and get The Regression Strain. It's a fabulous book. You will not be disappointed. And Kevin, thank you so much for being on today.
Thanks, Terry. It was really fun. It was really a pleasure, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you for listening to Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch. Tune in next Tuesday for another podcast episode.